Good evening and welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting for Livonia Public Schools Board of Ed for November 11th, 2024. I want to wish a happy Veterans Day to all our veterans that are out there, and thank you for your service. We're going to move on with agenda number 1, audience communications. I have no blue slips this evening, so that's good. We can move on to item 2, the Committee of the Whole. We do not have any items for this evening on the Committee of the Whole agenda.
That is correct, we do not.
Thank you. We're going to move on to item 3, the Building and Site Committee. And, well, Mrs. Burton is not here this evening. She's our chair. Mrs. Frank is also not here this evening. So it looks like Vice President Johnson is going to run this Building and Site Committee meeting this evening.
Well, thank you, Thank you, President Bradford.
Of course, you're going to do a wonderful job. Thank you.
I'm hoping so. I think I've been here before.
Yes, you have.
We have 4 items tonight. Item A is the 2025 bond renovation bid packet, and Mr. Francis and his crew will help us.
Good evening, everybody. How is you doing?
Good evening.
I don't even know if that was a sentence.
Was that how you used to do it?
Not sure what that
Sounded
word
a little
was.
Pittsburghy in there.
Yeah, I kind of ran it all together. I have a couple of familiar folks from Plant Moran Real Point for you. Colin and Brian are joining me at the table. We have 4 items that we're going to sort of work through together. Some might be a little heavy from me, some might be a little heavier from them, etc. But we'll run through them all. And we've got our 4th item is just an overall update, nothing that's going to be brought to the board for approval, just an update on something. So we'll get started whenever you would like us to get rolling.
You can go ahead and roll.
All right. All right. The 2025 bond renovation bid packet, I will say a couple things. One, as we've mentioned in the past, we've got for the summer, Churchill is one of the buildings being renovated in the summer of 25. We've got Johnson Upper Elementary being renovated next summer, or this coming summer. And we have Grant and we have Buchanan, and those are our 4 for the summer of 2024. We had very good coverage in this bid packet, and we are coming to you with the items that were in. I know it's a pretty big packet for just a few items because all that information is in there. And following this item, it's also the roofing bid pack. So there's just an extraordinary amount of paper or electronic papers in there for you. But we'll break it down, talk through a few of the items, and answer any of your questions. I'm going to hand it over to, you, Brian?
Yeah.
Mr. Weber will start there.
All right, thank you, Mr. Francis. So as typically done with our bond contractor bidding, it is a public bid. It was issued early October. It was on the street for about 3 weeks. Through that process, we posted to the Livonia Public Schools website, the required state websites, and then also job posting boards through Clark Construction. So,
if you may, just to let them know that we actually, the electronic, we went,
something
new for us was going electronic on the submission of bids forever. We were doing, it either had to be mailed in, usually like a FedEx or some type of carrier like that, or in-person folks showing up. And we, through our construction manager, Clark Construction, they had recommended, they said a lot of vendors actually like it. A lot of these contractors like to be able to do it electronically, saves them from, coming in, et cetera, et cetera. And we consulted Clark Hill, our attorney, law firm, and just wanted to make sure that we were all kind of on board with on the good side of jumping in with that, and it was all approved and everything was good to go. And I think that might be part of the reason we had a lot of really good coverage as well.
thank you. So without further ado, we can skip to page 3 and I can talk through some of the numbers here. There is good news, as Mr. Francis mentioned. 1, we did have good bid coverage. 2, pricing came in very well for us, came in under budget, so I'll talk through some of the numbers, and then obviously ask questions as we go through here.
And when he says page 3, he means page 6.
I'm sorry, I forget there's other pages on top of it. It's a matrix in the package. So as mentioned, this is Buchanan, Grant, Johnson, Churchill, typical scopes that we've done in previous phases to keep similarity between the buildings with the LMC renovations, bathroom renovations, kitchen renovations, And then one difference here is Buchanan Elementary, the air conditioning in the classrooms is getting upgraded. Those were units from a previous bond, coming to the end of their useful life that it'll be a one-for-one swap, but the units already have the air conditioning systems in it, so we'll be pulling those units and putting them in with a new model. So with that said, our budget at the top as shown was $12.9 million. Bids came in around 12.2, so we came into the good about $700,000 from our hard construction contractor prices. Moving down to the next section, we have our construction manager fees and costs. General conditions is always a multiplier of 2% that we have agreed with Clark Construction. So that came in right where we expected. Once again, a CM fee, 2%, that's previously negotiated in their contract, which is a multiplier against the contractor pricing. One difference here from previous recommendations, the CM staffing, which notes it's through 2026. We had negotiated an initial lump sum of staffing, and we track it on a monthly basis when Clark does the work, and it's an actual hours worked and rate with all the staff that they are. So to continue through 25 and 26, we made sure those hours were aligning. Rather than just coming for 25 and then again next year, we decided to just lump it up. We have the forecast amount of superintendents and their project managers, so we're bringing both years with the goal of finishing out the program with this recommendation.
And you can see just from the sheer numbers of buildings, we're getting to that goal, that end line. We've had 5 the last few years in the summer. This year it's 4, and then as we move forward, we don't have any more large high schools. We'll have all our larger middle school and upper elementary buildings, et cetera. So we'll be done. So you can see that we're starting to move towards that finish line with this project, with these projects and this initiative.
So we would not expect to see that line next year when we have the summer of 2026, or, yeah, this time next year.
That is correct.
We're
Unless
doing
there's a
summer
major
26.
change in scope or any other projects added, there would not be an adjustment to that staffing.
Okay.
Rolling through to the
I was just gonna say about the contingency, but I think you're about
Yep.
to. Okay.
So the contingency as well, our budget was $980,000. As you can see, we exceeded it with an actual $1.2 million. The variance here is we've typically come in the last couple of years with a 7% construction contingency. The teams work together well between French and Clark, and we have that routine. But we did bump it up to 10% this year based on some work that was getting added to Churchill's LMC. There's going to be a amount of added scope that is still being worked through right now, so there will be some known unknowns and then some unforeseens associated with the design that's still ongoing. So we're looking to set aside an additional amount this year just to account for some of that work that's being finalized right now.
Does that make sense? Remember, we talked a little bit
Maybe
about
that's nice
raising the
if-
ceiling, so we said we needed
That
to,
difference is just the difference between bumping it up to 10%?
Yes, that goes from our 7 to 10%, nothing more than that.
Right, and if something doesn't get spent, obviously, as always, we return it.
Yeah.
Yep. And as you see in the bottom right-hand corner, we're still to the good of $547,000. We are still under budget for the overall program this summer. So with that said, with the lowest responsible bidders as shown in the $12 million plus the markup of the fees and the general conditions, the recommendation total is $14,958,428 for these sites. And then I'm skipping, we're on page 6. If we skip to page 10, it is a blue chart or a schedule from Clark Construction. It'll list alternates. I just wanted to touch base on.
Really small, I can't see it, but, yeah, we did want to just run over a few of the alternates that we took.
You can start making.
are you
Yeah,
on
if
this
I could.
one?
We're on, it's this page here. It has like, it's a blue, if you have it in color, it'll be blue. And yeah, and some yellow as well.
It would be right behind Clark's letter if you.
It's titled Alternates Total Construction Cost. There's not a page number on it.
Bid tabs.
Oh, it was at the back of the
Yeah,
packet.
it might be that there, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. It was out of order.
Because I didn't print all the bid tabs.
It looks like this, and it's just called alternates. And then
It may
It's
be
actually the last
Yeah, it might be
page
their last page if it was
before
higher.
the roofing bid packet.
And there's there is a number on it, essentially.
Oh, I see it.
Okay. Let me know when you're ready. I can.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
Whenever you guys are ready.
Tabs alternate, keep going. Now you gotta go in that lot further.
It's commensurate with this though, right?
It does.
It does.
With these same things?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't have pages. I don't have pages either.
We can just talk through it. They're just not big ideas,
Yeah.
but we can just kind of talk through some of them and explain like why we accepted it. If that would just
Yep.
make it a little easier.
So there were four,
We're there.
we're good? Sorry about that. So there are 4 alternates total, and the idea is to understand at bid day, there could be some surprises. We want to make sure we have flexibility and have the adaptability or for some items that are not as critical as others. So our first one was at Churchill High School. There are 2 bathrooms just on the adjacent side of the main offices that we asked for an alternate to upgrade the tile, the finishes in those bathrooms to bring them up. It's been quite a few years, I believe, since those have been renovated, so we're trying to spruce those bathrooms up.
They're the restrooms that generally get used because it's right around the corner from the PAC. And a lot of the visitors will use them if they're coming for performance in the PAC or just in general. If we have PD, like we did last week, lots of teachers were there. Frankly, this was going to be, unless it came in at $8 gazillion on its own, this was going to be a yes for me because they're not in good condition. And they're unfortunately right up front where many people will use them.
And let me step back, just to be clear, these totals are included in the recommendation
Yes.
amount of the 14.9. These are not in addition.
These are not on top of what we just talked about.
Yep.
These are into that dollar. We're just pointing out some of the things that we're saying we put out as alternates and we said yes to.
Since this isn't something that might be easy for folks listening to the meeting, could we just make sure that we're giving the totals, the dollar
Yep,
totals
absolutely.
as
Yep.
well?
So the Churchill, alternate one for Churchill, the total is $14,825 for the upgraded finishes in the 2 bathrooms. Our second alternate was, I'm sorry, what was that?
That's for both bathrooms.
That is correct. Yep. Alternate 2 was for Grant Elementary. So there are 2 classrooms that are quote-unquote landlocked and do not have exterior windows in that facility. We explored multiple different options of creating existing, or windows in the existing walls. It's a load-bearing wall that could come with multiple surprises and high cost associated with it. So we actually came to the finish line with an LED wall, or a light that would mimic
Daylight.
a daylight on the wall. So it'll be built out, a small wall would be built out with a carpenter, and then an LED light will be inserted to simulate a wall to the outside. They make light fixtures specific to do that.
It's something we've been exploring for a little while, and we really started looking at it for some of the pool rooms that don't have any exterior, and it was like a great idea, except for the fact it was going to be in a pool room, and between the humidity and all the water, everything,
Chlorine.
and the chlorine, we were very much discouraged by professionals to say, don't put it in there because you're really it's just going to get eaten away pretty quickly from the environment in that space. But we loved, like when we went and saw them, we loved the idea. So when it came to this, it 2 classrooms in the elementary school at Grant without any, it's just a little bit of a trick to the mind and to the eye, putting it in there to give it a sense of some outdoor light. And that's an appropriate place to put those because you're not going to have that same kind of wear and tear just from the environment that you'd have in a pool room.
And it is a very different environment. You've been in classrooms that don't have any natural light. And so to be able to put this in these classrooms, I think is really worthwhile.
Mrs. Bradford?
Thank you. Okay, so I'm picturing an insert. Is it made out of plaster, or what's the?
We're going to build out the wall a
Yeah,
little bit.
It would be just a stud wall, a real thin stud wall with drywall on it, and leave a pocket for a couple windows in each one that just
And
insert
then
into that.
there's like windows. It looks like
It's
a
a
real
rectangle.
window.
It's just
Yep.
a rectangular window.
It'll look like a window.
If you walked in it and you were never in that room before and didn't know any better, you'd just think it was.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And
I'm
if
just
need, we
trying
can
to
send,
picture.
we've done a lot of research with the architect, and we have website, we can share a website to show what models we're
Oh,
doing
that'd
it.
be great
Yeah.
if you could send
Yeah,
that
we'll
to
pass
us,
them
just
along.
to see what it kind of looks
Yep.
like. Okay, great.
So the total
Did
for
you
the.
get a number on that?
No, I did not. So the 2 classrooms total, and there's multiple windows in each classroom, is a total of $38,717. Alternate 3, which was not accepted for the scope of work, was there is a new air handling unit at Johnson Upper Elementary. There's an alternate to put a screen around it for aesthetics around the actual mechanical unit, just because where it sits on the facility. We opted not to accept this, one, for a cost, but 2, sometimes it's prohibitive from a maintenance standpoint, And the third leg of it, it'd be inconsistent throughout the rest of the district at this point. Not every rooftop unit or mechanical unit on other buildings have it, so it was not.
We
it
have
was
this
essentially
condition in
setting a
multiple
standard.
buildings that look like Johnson, that are built like Johnson, and also our maintenance crews were saying that when you put a screen around them, it becomes more difficult potentially when you have to actually work on the unit.
So that one was not accepted.
I'm sorry, quick question.
Yes, President Bradford.
Thank you. So who requested this? Did somebody request to have
We-
this, or you just?
We did. We did.
Oh.
We sometimes want to think through things, and that's why they're an alternate. So we'll say, just like those windows we talked about at Grant, are they a necessity for what is going to happen in that school? No, because for decades, there have not been windows in the room. But we say, let's try it, see what the cost is, see where the budget ends up after the bid day. And that's the point of an alternate for us a lot of times, is
Okay.
to say, let's just see. It's something we like the idea of, something we would want to do. The screen is, I think one of our guys brought it up, and we said, sure, put it on there.
I
And then as
see.
we talked
Okay.
about it, then we had conversations from people like Harry and Carl that said, when our guys go up there and work on them, it can sometimes be difficult depending on how they're attached. And then I came up and said, we have multiple buildings that look just like that. We don't have them there. Are we going to start something
Okay.
that
That
right,
makes
is
sense.
not a necessity?
Okay, perfect,
Sometimes it
thanks.
comes from the architect, sometimes it comes from
Okay.
us, sometimes it comes from a member of our team because they've
Somebody
seen it
asked a
elsewhere.
question and then,
And
okay.
sometimes it comes from the person who's doing the bidding. They may offer something that we didn't anticipate as well, that may save money or may be a worthwhile addition. So those requests can come from a lot of different places. Normally, they come from us, and it's a look-see to determine whether or not, the cost benefit to having that item added.
All right, and our last alternate number 4 is at Buchanan Elementary School. This was accepted for an amount of $36,841. So in the kindergarten wing of Buchanan, between each of the kindergarten rooms is a space off of the corridor that's underutilized right now. So the intent is to provide additional lockers and then also cabinetry for storage options for the teachers in those areas.
And that's a common item that we have in other elementary schools, K4s, between the kindergarten classrooms, having a shared storage space and a sort of like a little mini workspace for them as well. So we're going to try to create that. So as opposed to those screens, which we really don't have in places, we do have a feature in some schools that we said, again, let's make it an alternate, let's see how it comes in, and then we can take it if we're on the good.
So that completes the run-through of everything. If anybody has questions, fire away, but all in all, good news, good coverage,
Yes.
good
Okay,
pricing, so
great.
it was a good bid day.
Okay. You ready to go to B?
Sure, whenever you're ready. This is our roofing bid packet. We have two buildings, and Colin Frank from Plant Moran Real Point is going to talk to this. We have two roofs that are being done on this campus. We have this building that we're sitting in, along with partial of the warehouse. And then we have Churchill High School, partial there, and we have Webster. And
Yep.
again, bid coverage was very
Great,
good.
yeah.
Very good.
Yeah, so continuation of the roofing program with RTA. Like Phil said, Churchill, Webster, central office, warehouse. We went through the public bid process, posting it with a local newspaper and the state of Michigan website. We did receive 20 bid proposals for the 4 different projects. We ended up with at least 3 for each location. And then, so they were all, below budget and tight pricing, within 1 to 3%, and I can go through that. But if we want to jump to
You
the,
want to go to this?
yeah, we'll jump to
Your shot, yeah,
the cost summary page.
With the grid.
So Royal Roofing, who did some work last summer, and they've been in and out of each summer for the past few years. One, Churchill and Webster Elementary, both coming in, pretty significantly under budget. MTD, who has also worked in the district previously, won the central office project, came in under budget as well. And then Lutz Roofing, who has worked last summer and I think for the past few summers as well. They've been successful. That won the warehouse project. Contingency, we're holding at 6%. It's been successful. It's been a great number for the past few summers. So total recommendation of $4,363,241. We continue to see the roofing prices normalize from some of the craziness we saw in past years.
Just to interject.
There's, okay.
Just because of the tight pricing, we did bring in multiples for each building to scope out and do post-bid reviews, and ultimate leads were our lowest responsible bidders for each category. But we wanted to make sure that if there was a blip on any of them, we had the other interviews completed for a timing aspect. But a lot of the usual suspects, which is great news, and they all checked out.
We've used.
Is that why we're seeing the variance that we're seeing? Because we anticipated when this was budgeted and the cost estimates were done, we were still working with those elevated
We were.
prices that we've seen?
Yeah, we maintain, and I'll give Colin the credit of maintaining our matrix and spreadsheet, understanding where bid prices were last year. Inherently, we carried 5 to 6% of inflation or escalation costs. These were actually coming in right at what we were last year, close to it, that we didn't see much of an increase at all, which is great news. In fact, to show my age, my first summer here was 2018. We did homes, and these are hovering around the prices we were seeing back then.
I'm gonna jump in and just to point out that there was an alternate in this, since we're talking alternates tonight. We had an alternate for Churchill High School. Again, it was a partial. We've done sections before. We've got, the field house was put out as an alternate because not knowing, again, how pricing would come in, and this is the purpose for these alternates sometimes, to give us the flexibility. We had alternate on the roof of the field house at Churchill. Pricing came in so well that we added the field house roof and are still under budget from what we presumed Churchill would have been. So it was a no-brainer to say, yes, we're gonna accept that alternate. So you can see that if you look, and you don't have to, I'll just read it to you real quick, but in RTA's memo or letter, it does point out that Royal Roof had the base bid of $1.995 million for Churchill, and then also had the replacement of the field house at $421,700. So putting those two together, we felt very good about having that and getting all of that roofing done. And Royal is a company that can have the manpower to be able to do that. Because if you're at the high school, you can't do the whole thing because it's just too big.
So will they be there most of the summer then?
They'll be at both of those schools most of the summer. The warehouse and central office should be much shorter, probably in under a month.
Okay.
For each of them.
Okay.
Yep.
If the field house was an alternate, what kind of condition was it in?
Yep.
Pretty much I'm assuming it was pretty much at the end of life, but it
Yes.
was an alternate, and we know that there are some of our roofs that are at end of life.
Anywhere in that but the purple is very bad.
Okay.
And then the red and the orange are ones that we really want to get on. The field house was at a yellow, but that still has been, is that the original from when we?
It was.
So that was done when the field house was created 24 years ago.
Okay.
So that's a good life on a
So
roof.
2 years ago,
Okay.
it was in the yellow, so
Okay.
we would assume it
So
would probably
even
be
starting to
in the
roll into an
or
orange.
it'd be poor.
Mhm.
Okay.
So RTA always gets up on there and checks
Yeah.
all our roof stuff. We don't go just off of this because they also design it. And that's why the alternate made sense. Like we could, if we
Yep.
didn't get it, we could say, maybe we put it out next year, one more year will be okay, but getting the pricing that we're getting it feels good to get it done.
And I'm hoping that we get a little economy of scale. They're already on site. We don't have to mess up our parking lots.
Well, that makes sense because
You
it's
know.
that company that won the bid also sharpened their pencil on the alternate and put it all together, and we're still to the good.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, some of these were really tight.
Yeah, within
Like
1 to
hundreds of
3%.
dollars.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and I was just gonna jump to the maps. We can start with Webster. Webster, obviously, we're doing the entire roof. Most of it is in the red. And then with the warehouse, there was an area kind of over where food service sits that was replaced in 2018, so we aren't touching that part of it. We're only touching Area A. And then Churchill, the area that is kind of blacked out is the area that we are excluding. And some of that was coordination with the bond program that's going on. That's a part of our consideration as we're doing that, so like
Over the PAC was done
Yep.
when they built the
Right,
PAC.
yeah.
And then you can see the field house on that. And then also central office, there's a storage shed that's really, storage shed and the new stairwell is really the only areas that we're not doing, so.
So Churchill was pretty close to needing, this one
Yeah.
needed to be done this summer.
Yep, it was a big
Because this was
need.
2 years ago, and we have most of that area in the
Yes.
red.
Yep.
Yes.
And then we'll circle back and start looking at some of the other areas of the high school. I know there's areas at other high schools that we need to start prepping for the next couple of years, so it's cyclical.
And just for fun, and Brian said he felt old because of the roofing before. So when we started this program and we had RTA do the original walks of all the roofs and the assessment that we got this color coded, and then we had ranked them just in overall. Some might have a bad portion, a good portion. We ranked them overall, and I remember presenting that to the board. Back then, Churchill overall was the best roof in the district. So you're now looking at it. But this is how long we've been doing this, though. Is we just kind of take bites out of it each summer and keep working through it. Any other questions?
Nope.
Okay, we're going to ask for that to go on to next week's voting meeting as well.
Okay. We'll go down to 3C, Fieldhouse Equipment Replacement.
So we have, speaking of the field houses, the equipment.
Nice segue.
Thank you. The equipment in the three the field houses, while we have been maintaining items and whatnot, the hoops, the basketball hoops they're called portable basketball hoops, even though we don't move them around. They're not, meaning, they're on a stand and you could move them. We don't generally do it unless we need to. But as opposed to a traditional basketball hoop, which is mounted or comes from the ceiling or on a wall, et cetera, right? So these are on the floor, but we really don't move them around too much, but you can. We have 6 at each high school that are original equipment, talking about from when we built the field houses in the early 2000s. And we also have, in the ceilings, there are 2 volleyball setups that come down, and there's one, it's called a multi-purpose practice cage, but for ease, it's a batting cage, because that's what we use it for. So all 3 have that same setup. So working with the athletic directors, having conversations and walking the field house and having meetings with Mr. Etu and Mrs. Smith and Mrs. Oquist about just athletics, as the board has dedicated some of our fiscal efforts to go towards PE and the gymnasiums and our athletics. This was something that came up with regard to those hoops, and one of the big needs was a second batting cage. We have right now a 2 volleyball, 1 batting cage configuration in each of the field houses. We are proposing here, and all 3 ADs were unanimous about this, they have a great need to have a second batting cage, because unfortunately Michigan springs are not very cooperative with the weather, and spring sports you have a lot of wet and sometimes even snow still. So they have to bring in softball, they have to bring in baseball, and they really, all 3 of them said, we really need a second cage to accommodate that. So when I asked about the volleyball, and asking the question that presumably somebody sitting at this table would ask, I said, well, what about volleyball? And as they explained it was, volleyball, the 2 volleyball sets that come down, they just come down from the ceiling, and first of all, they're in poor condition. One of them, it has to get fixed quite often. But that's not for our volleyball teams. It's for PE. And 25 years ago, when those were built, this is when I was working at Churchill, and they had 2,400 kids in the school, and Stevenson had 2,300 kids in the school, and Franklin had 2,000 something. So they don't have the same number of PE classes anymore. They don't run the same amount of kids through. So the ADs were very comfortable and confident saying, we have no problem with our PE classes and the volleyball needs. Not to mention, both the comp gym and the field house can put poles in, and that's what actually the teams use. So only the PE classes we're using or are using the volleyball. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands that the removal of one of the volleyball drop downs and replacing it with a batting cage is not a hardship for anybody having to do with volleyball. It's actually going to be a help to softball and baseball, and PE will still be fine. So these are the items that I wanted to describe through. The packets can be confusing, and so I want to just explain what the packet is. We have 3 of them because we have 3 schools. In essence, looking at one is looking at all 3, right? We just, all of them are getting the same exact hoops, portable hoops, 6 each for a total of 18. And all 3 of them are going to have one volleyball removed and replaced with the batting cage drop down. So when you had looked through the packet, you can see that we have, and we needed to show the quotes. So when you flip to the first page of any of the high schools, the first quote from Behrman Associates is for $94,500, and that's for all 6 and the delivery, and they've already worked it out that they understand, the company understands, 6 of them are gonna go to Franklin, 6 of them are gonna go to Churchill, and 6 of them are so all of that is built into these quotes, okay? So that's the brand that we have currently. It actually is the best price, and it is also the brand that we've had for over 2 decades, and the athletic directors are very happy with them and are excited to have those replaced. This also includes getting the logoing on the pads that go around them and all that good stuff. So
when it says color, Phil, is it not only this, but it's also
yes,
this
you can see
around
that, and there also includes on that padding the inlay and putting into the logos that we have for each school. So this actually started at one point with trying to replace the pads several years ago on the current hoops, and most of the companies were telling the athletic directors, you might as well just get a whole new thing because you'd have to, nobody makes that size and that can do that shape, so you're gonna have to customize the pads and yada yada, and for a little bit more, you might as well just buy the whole thing. So we finally said, okay, then that's what we're gonna have to do.
Because they're
old
not in
anyway.
good condition.
No, they're
Yes.
old anyway.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, President Bradford. Any other questions?
I do have a question. Not
Did you
included.
have your hand raised?
I did, and you weren't looking, so I went ahead here. Sorry, everybody. All right, not included, the removal, disposal, recycling of the existing hoops. So what will we be doing with those?
This company doesn't do that. It has to be open and ready for them to come bring them in. The district will take care of the appropriate removal and recycling as
Yeah,
needed.
none of them can be utilized anywhere else, correct?
Yeah, we
It's just
wouldn't
gonna have
put
to-
them somewhere else. I mean, right now, we're saying they're not the condition for our students.
Perfect.
So I don't know who else we would,
Okay.
someone else's students?
I don't, that was
Not
my
ours.
question.
I don't want to do that either. So
No, we're not gonna resell them,
LPS
in
will-
other
yeah,
words. They're not-
LPS will get, if we can figure out any value for them, if anyone finds value in them, we're always happy to do that, but if they have to be recycled, we'll
I
do
mean, what
that.
about scrap metal? Do we ever do that?
We do. So,
Okay.
yeah, I'll talk to Mr. Lau, and he'll have them disposed of appropriately in preparation for the new ones.
Perfect,
Hmm?
okay. Thank you, President, or Vice President Johnson.
Thank you, President Bradford. We have Mrs. Bonnefield.
Madeline, did you have a question?
Thank you. That was my question as well. Thank you.
Okay, I had that one on my list too. So why, if we don't move them, why are we doing the ones that take up floor space instead of ones that come down from the ceiling or from the wall or just are permanent?
The ones from the wall, or the ones that do come down from the ceiling, they are there, and they're in, the condition has not been a concern for them.
Okay.
then we are able to have far more students using hoops because you wouldn't, the only way to put more on the wall would be to have more wall space. So we're able to have 6 more hoops in a gymnasium where you can have a pocket of students here and a
Okay.
pocket of students here. And then
okay.
when you have a tournament or things that you have to use, it, you can then bring down the other more traditional version of them.
Okay.
So this is very much like I said with volleyball, these are very much a PE item as well.
Okay, okay. And then, you mentioned that the volleyball setups are not in superb condition. Is there any, while we're in there, up there, is there any repairs to those volleyball setups that we can or
We're
need
going to take the
or-
worst of the 2 down,
Yeah.
and then we've been, as needed, we repair them. I'm sure that at some point, we might have to then go up and also exchange those, but for now, this was a pretty big purchase, and we wanted to
Okay.
stick with these 2 because they were the priority for the athletic directors.
Okay.
And when I say athletic directors, and I'm not talking to the people around this table, because you know that, but if folks are at home, the athletic directors don't just oversee varsity sports and junior varsity sports. We're not talking about extracurricular when I say the athletic directors ask for this or supporting that. They also work with the physical education teachers with those departments. PE is in tune with the athletic directors, and all of those pieces of equipment and those spaces, both the comp gym and the field house, is all sort of the realm of the athletic director. So folks
like
at
the weight
home,
room.
a weight room, et cetera. Just like when we redid the weight room, yes, the athletes use it, but so do students. So just wanted to make sure anybody at home that's listening in, we're not just talking about varsity volleyball or varsity baseball, or we're talking about PE classes, personal fit, et cetera.
And I think soon we will be bringing something about the volleyball systems in 2 of the schools, right? In
I already
the
ordered
competition
those.
gym.
Yeah, no,
So we're good
we
on
already
that.
did that. Mhm,
Okay.
mhm. The posts,
So we have
Mrs.
addressed some
Okus
of
is
those,
talking
too.
about the posts that actually volleyball teams use versus the drop down.
Okay.
You want me to go on with the quote? I got 1 page in. We keep going?
Sure.
Okay. I just want to let you know that the next 2 items because we need the 3 quotes, we have another item with another manufacturer from Behrman, and I just kept all of the items that come with the quote in there. And then you can get to the point where we have a third, which was the Porter from BSN Sports. So I just wanted to make sure, I know Mrs. Smith's over there listening to me intently, and we made sure we had 3 quotes on those portable hoops. But we do recommend the first one that you see, which is the Sleg, which is the same as they have now, same manufacturer, and they've held up for us well. So as you keep flipping through and get past that Porter, back to Behrman and Associates, they had quoted 3 different types of, again, I'll just keep calling them batting cages, even though they're multi-purpose nettings. So we have the side lifting, the center lifting, and the front lifting versions. All 3 are doable, but I asked about, in the rep that I was working with, actually said the side lift, even though it's the least expensive, he believes to be just the better system. It's just an ease of use type of system. I shared all of this with the athletic directors at the 3 high schools. They're all very supportive of the side lift version of the net, as well as the portable hoops that we're looking at. Dusty Hall, athletic administrator at Franklin, was also involved with me in talking through some of these and getting out some of these quotes as well. So even though you have a pretty thick packet, it's one by itself is thick, and then we have it at 3 schools, so apologies for that. I'm gonna really, for the voting meeting, I'm gonna narrow this down a little bit. I'm gonna get rid of all the extra pieces that go with the quotes and just have the numbers in there. But I wanted to make sure for the sake of having it on record, we have all the documentation. Are there any questions?
Just when I have, in terms of funding for this, it's coming from the capital
This
projects.
is capital
fund, right?
projects, and thank you for saying that, because I think I should just read into it, because the folks at home haven't heard me say a full number on this.
Good idea.
So the total amount for the project via the capital projects would be $333,300. And again, this is the removal of the volleyball drop down and replacing it with a net, and that's or a cage for all 3 schools, and a total of 18 of the brand new portable hoops, 6 at each high school. So that's quite a bit of equipment. And if they serve us another 25 years, that's pretty good.
Yes.
President Bradford.
Thank you. When do we anticipate these would be installed?
I have to work with, after we have this meeting, I can reach out to him and ask what his time frame
I mean,
is.
is it a
Things-
long lead time or?
No, it's not, it's nothing that's ridiculous. But
Okay.
my understanding when we talked in general terms was like winter,
Okay,
but I can try to get him narrowed down. I'm sure he's a little bit at the mercy of the manufacturer as well. But
Sure.
when I can get a head
Okay.
start on it by talking to
yeah,
him.
no problem. Thanks.
Any other questions on C? If not, we'll move to D, filter first update.
Okay. Thank you very much. This was something I briefly mentioned at the study session last week, and this is a program that is a requirement from the state of Michigan, and I believe Eagle is the department that specifically with the state of Michigan is running this through. The simplest way, and anytime you guys want to jump in with any part of it, the simplest way I can describe this program is that child care centers and schools must have filtered water and filtered to the specifications that the state has laid out. A lot of this is being driven by the lead in water crisis that we're all very familiar with in Michigan. So there are specific requirements, but there are also dollars that are out there for grant dollars. We have applied for those dollars. Mrs. Smith shared with me the what we had put in for, because what we did, we had our team in-house work with Arch Environmental, which we're all very familiar with. Arch actually is the company in the group that over the years has done our water testing. They work with us on many different environmental, they work with the district on asbestos abatement and drinking water and all of those items. So they've been our guide in this program. We have applied for over $500,000 worth of grant dollars to go towards this, because in essence, we need to have water that is filtered, like I said, for students and for adults, just people in the buildings. And we have to have the drinking fountains, the old kind, those old bubblers, those either need to be removed or turned off, or we can filter them. But the real thrust of this is in a school, the state wants, based upon the ratio of people that are in a building, keeping it simple, if there's 500 people in a building, we have 500 students at that building, or the capacity of that building, then we need to have 100-to-1 ratio on those, our water bottle fillers, their hydration stations. That's really one of the big pieces in the linchpin to this entire program, is having hydration stations in a school and having enough of them to meet the 100-to-1 ratio. So again, if we had 500 students or 500 folks in there, we would want to have then 5 of those hydration stations. If you're in a classroom, and if you think about like an old one of, when we were all in our science labs, and you had the running water, you still might need that running water for science experiments, or you might need a sink somewhere for washing hands or washing dishes. We will be obliged by this law to actually, if we're not shutting them off, if we still need them to run, we need to make note that it's not for drinking. And if there is something that is for drinking, we need to note that it's able to be drinking water. So it's really an informational piece with regard to saying, this here can be potable water, and these other items here, we need to let people know it's not being filtered. You shouldn't drink from that. and anything else that you can drink from will have a filter, and a filter that meets the specifications for minimizing the amount of lead to a very small, and I think it's like the smallest potential of 1 or something like that.
Yeah,
I think it's 1. Very low amount. So anything that isn't labeled as not for, we then need to label as, yes, this is for. But our key thrust, and we've already begun this process, LPS is a little bit ahead of folks who have done nothing, because as you all know, from this building and from all of our other buildings, we've got hydration stations. We've been putting them in since the 2013 bond. We just need to put more of them in to meet those ratios. You want to pass it over? Yeah.
Yeah, it's placing into the bond renovations. So this was known last year, didn't know the full dynamic of it, but we integrated in a change of the 2024 summer in mid-project. We did add filtration in the kitchens. We're overhauling the kitchen, so it is required there's a source of filtered water in the food prep areas. So that was included as a change. We also obviously have it in the 2025, yes, 2025. Usually it's you that screws up the
I
summer,
know.
so I inherit it. So we have done that, and then we've also, because the survey is now being complete, for the 4 buildings we're touching this summer, we understand we'll have plumbers in the building. We've set aside allowances in the recommendation that I had earlier. There's money set aside in those contracts specifically for, once we understand if there are more hydration stations going in those buildings, for efficiency and understanding we have plumbers in the building, we can then work with Clark Construction, define a scope and get a change order to get those installed while we have the buildings torn apart. And then rolling back to 2022 and 2023 sites, the intent would be, that would be a separate package we could issue, would get stamped drawings, put it out to bid, and handle those buildings separately, understanding that this was an unknown at those times that we're in the buildings, we'll have to go back.
And ECC is good.
Yes.
We have filters in those, in that building.
In just a little bit in the sorry, go ahead. A little bit of a challenge is the infrastructure. It is getting not only cold water supply to those areas, it's getting the wastewater, the underground piping that sometimes might not be in a convenient area. So we'll have to analyze where it's feasible to make sure that we're not going across the building to pick up some of the plumbing needs in that. So that'll be part of the assessment.
Mrs. Costa.
So with this new requirement, what is the expectation that the state is putting on us for having all this done?
I'm glad you asked. Look at that. I even highlighted it.
Yeah.
Yes. So schools, I will read you the 4 bullets that we have. Schools and childcare centers complete a drinking water management plan by January 24th, 2025. So we have worked with Arch and we have that plan. Child care centers ensure that any water furnished to children is from filtered sources by October 24th, 2025. As we mentioned, our early childhood center has filtered water. Schools have approved filters on all consumptive fixtures by the end of the 25-26 school year. So the end of the following school year. And then schools and child care centers begin ongoing sampling and certify compliance with requirements once filters are installed. Schools must sample annually and child care centers must sample every 2 years. So those are the 4 bullet points that they have on the timeline from the state.
Sorry. I
You
just
stepped
had
on the
one,
floor.
I know I brought it. So I know that a lot of this legislation is coming from this concern for lead, and we've established that is not necessarily, all these things are not happening in our district because there's a concern for lead in our water.
That is correct, and we have been doing 2 things. One, we've been having our water tested. If we find something that is high, we either close it off or we swap it out and filter it so that we can get it down. Most of the time, a flush will simply help, because sometimes when you have those long standing periods at the holiday times, et cetera, but we address those if we find them in our own tests. And we've also, as I already mentioned, started with hydration stations for quite some time now. And whether you've noticed them or not, we've little by little, even before this, been adding them, simply because you get a high school that says,
Yeah.
we've got a lot of kids. We have a lot of people show up for games. Can we get something back by the field house? Can we get something in this back end of this building? And little by little, like elves in the night, like we've gone in and we've done those in places. So we are not at the ratio, okay? It's almost Christmas. But little by little, we've been kind of putting them in places simply from our own need. And with this, it will speed up what our original plan was, because we were planning every time we've gotten into buildings, and you've been with me on walks, and Mr. Lau's been, and Mr. Roberts, and we walk through, and we see an old bubbler in a hall, and we say, nope. In bond renovation, we're pulling that out, and we're putting a hydration station in. And we were doing that and saying that before this came to us. So this is just basically us now putting a little bit more speed into our efforts that we've been doing anyway.
Thank you.
Mrs. Bonnefield.
Do you have something you want to talk about?
I just wanted to follow up with the message we recently sent out to parents. I'd like to read right from that for our community, because just because this came out recently in the city of Livonia, that there was a concern about the lead action level exceedance. So there was a question with regard to Livonia schools. So I would just like to read through what we sent out so that we have that on record. Testing schools is a voluntary decision made by the school district. There is no mandatory requirement from the state of Michigan at this time. There will be now with the filter first. So our response was, we wanted to inform you that Livonia Public Schools does not have lead water service lines at any of our schools. Our water service lines are 6-inch to 8-inch steel pipes. Livonia Public Schools, working with Arch Environmental, has been voluntarily testing water for lead on a regular rotation for several years. There have been no concerns over lead levels in those drinking water tests. So it's an additional layer of protection that we have been providing for well over a decade. So we have been participating in voluntary testing for many, many years now. We do not have lead pipes, we have steel pipes, and we have not had any issues over lead levels on our drinking water tests. So I wanted to reiterate that, because it is something we do get periodically, and it's certainly understandable. And I think when that recently came out from our municipality about homeowners needing to check, of course, folks were asking about the schools. So our staff has been well aware of the filter first requirements. It's something we've discussed for several months now. It is a relatively onerous requirement. Not speaking to whether it's good or bad, it really is a significant undertaking. So we were happy that a grant was offered. That was not initially in place, and so Mrs. Smith did go through that process, and that will certainly aid us in putting in these additional water filtration systems. But we also really talked through what would be appropriate for regular use within our classrooms, and that's where we came up with the K2 bubblers having filters so that we could still have those available to our little ones, because it's a little different to send a 5-year-old down the hall to find the closest bottle filler versus a 12-year-old. So many of our students do bring water bottles. We see them anytime you visit a classroom, and so because more students are bringing those, more adults have those, many of us have them on a regular basis. It really is something that's utilized, quite frankly, pretty extensively across our schools. So this is a good thing, that we'll have these additional pieces available, and that hopefully we will have funding to support at least the majority of these initial costs. This will be an ongoing cost for
Because
years to
you
come.
have to change filters.
Absolutely.
And we were already doing that, but this is just a higher volume. You guys had questions?
So the current systems with the hydration stations that we have, are the filters that are currently in the current hydration stations, are those up to spec for the new legislation?
We have ordered the new filters.
So we do
for-
have to.
We do have to buy filters, and we'll have to
upgrade-
continue to buy, yes, filters.
But we need to upgrade the filters that are in there, okay. And then,
Just on that topic, though, Mr. Lau has already begun the process of, and one of the fights that's gonna happen here is every district and every childhood center across the state
Is
is
gonna
doing
need-
exactly this, right? So everybody's gonna be running to the store, if you will, to get this. So he's already procured the hydration stations from our supplier that we've been using for
Okay.
quite some time, and filters. So we're trying to stay one step ahead of the crowd.
oh, that's great. And is there any, we have a number that we have to meet, is there any location requirements? Like, can we have two next to each
Yes.
other?
You can have 7 next to each other.
Okay.
It's a ratio for the building.
Okay.
And I'll tell you that there will be times where you probably might see a couple or few if we can, because if we have the capacity in that area as opposed to the hardships that we will find of maybe having to saw cut floors and get wastewater away, not just water
In,
to it,
the
but we
water
need
out.
water
Yes.
waste away. So overall, we had a pretty in-depth meeting with the representative from Arch Environmental, and Andre was on it as well. And we talked about those things, and that was one of our questions. And she said, it's all about the ratio. There is no X feet from each other, et cetera, type
That's
of thing.
probably good.
It's capacity.
Okay.
You think we don't have fun here during the day? I'm just telling you right now.
And then I know we've already included a lot of this in the bond work, and a lot of this was planned before this mandate was placed on us. But when we talk about having to possibly go into plumbing and cut the floor and stuff, it's gonna get expensive. Do we think that the grant is going to sort of offset those additional costs, understanding that it's not 100%, but we were gonna have certain costs anyway, because we were in the process of doing that? Is the grant gonna help or cover those additional costs going into buildings that, right, because we go into buildings that are under construction, the plumbers are there, now we're gonna have to go into a building with a plumber, and we've got the, right, so, it's one of those, as we say, unfunded mandates, which is frustrating for us, especially since we're already on that path and probably eventually would get there.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, we will know more. They're announcing the grants later this month, so I think we'll have a good idea, because at this point, I don't know if they will be prorating districts, so that we asked for full reimbursement of what we estimate the full cost to be.
Oh, okay.
But until we actually get our award letter, we won't know if they're gonna cover 100% of it, so we
And
we can
also put in
update.
for over 600. I think I said 500 earlier, but we put in for over 600 worth. But that was the machines, the filters, the plumbing, the electrical, because again, these need power,
Yep.
these need water, they need water in, they need water out. There's a lot to them. We've been doing them for quite some time.
Yeah.
But it's just a matter of we're gonna hit some hiccups. I don't want it to sound like it's super simple. Yes, we've started, but we've been putting them in the places that make the most sense for us.
Yeah.
If we have to put 3 more in a place that
You gotta
doesn't
find
have
the
that
space.
capacity,
Yeah.
we're gonna have to make the capacity.
And thankfully, we're not starting from scratch.
Correct.
I mean,
Yeah,
we
oh,
really are at an advantage because this is
Oh, wait.
something that was
Alice,
included.
Alice, there you go.
Yeah.
Apparently.
Before you go.
Yeah.
The grant, is this a one-time grant? Is it perhaps?
At this point, all I know is that it is a one-time funding. They haven't put this, to my knowledge, into an annual budget, so.
Okay.
But again, we'll continue to apply for any funds that are available to cover the costs. One thing I don't know if you mentioned too, not only does this help us, this grant was for the filling stations, but also we could apply for all the filters that need to go in, like Phil was saying, at those bubblers too, so we've applied for that funding.
Okay,
Yep.
stay here. Sorry.
Now that we got you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. So let's say we get the grant, the $500,000 grant, but we're going above costs, which we think we're going to go over that cost possibly when we're trying to do that. Where will the financing come from? Is this going to be out of bond? Is it going to be out of capital projects? Where will that?
Most likely our capital projects fund.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, that's where I wanted to know.
Yep. And we will, it's on they won't just send the money once they approve it, then we'll submit our invoices and then they'll reimburse us based on the invoices. So we'll submit actual costs and hopefully be able to get full reimbursement for it. But again, I'm not sure how many districts took advantage of this grant opportunity to know if there's going to be any proration that takes place, so.
Wonderful.
In districts that don't have the type of personnel that we are very fortunate to have, I'm imagining are just scrambling, right? Not everybody has a Mr. Lau and a Mr. Roberts and a relationship with an Arch Environmental and a relationship with the supplier because we've been doing this. We're big, and so that's gonna make it tough because we have to do it a lot. But we have some advantages as well based upon just what we've been doing and kind of how we operate to begin with. So I just wanna put that out as well.
Okay, Mrs. Jarvis had a question.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. The ratio of 100 to 1, is that only counting students, or is that students and staff?
That's, we had some mixed answers on that, but the last and most definitive answer we had was that it's students.
Okay. If we are somewhere in between the hundreds, do we round up or do we round down?
Up.
And what happens if we have an increase in students and tip over that 100 mark next year? Do we have to add another bubbler in a building?
We've generally been looking at, we could, but we've also been looking at what the building can handle. So we would go with a number that what is reasonable to believe we would have in a building. See what I'm saying? So like if Coolidge can handle 600, but right now has 550, then we're gonna go with like that 600 number. And if Rosedale handles whatever it might have, you know, and Mr. Green will say, I'm looking at what's coming up. We probably aren't going to double in this place, et cetera, et cetera. So it might be way down the line that we might have to add one. For the near foreseeable future, we're trying to plan for what we have capacity for and what we believe could meet that capacity. Churchill could have 2,500 kids in it, but we know it's not going to have 25 kids in it in the next few years.
Right. And my final question is about consumables. I'm assuming that those filters that have to be replaced either annually or at least occasionally. Do we have some accommodation for that in our
It's gonna be a
budget?
maintenance.
Am I correct too? I feel like I read something that what's going on in them too actually will have a light on them that then indicate.
We have
yeah.
those already.
So,
They have a warning.
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, but we have, if you're asking, we're going to need to have a larger filter budget in the maintenance budget overall. And that's something that Mrs. Smith is just going to have to put into the budget that she, as a portion, it'll be a small portion of our overall budget, but it would have to be an increased amount annually for filters because we're going to have more of them to replace than we do today.
Right. Thank you.
And we will update you once we hear back on the grant.
Okay. Any other
Thank you.
questions on this item?
This was just info, there's nothing to vote on. When we do have purchases that meet the threshold for the board approval, we would of course bring those.
Right. If there are no other questions, that concludes Building and Site. President Bradford?
Thank you,
I
everybody.
thank you. And
Thank you.
thank
Have a good evening.
Thank you, Brian and Colin, for being here
Yep,
tonight.
thanks for being
Thank
here,
you.
guys.
Thanks for having us.
Appreciate that.
Thank you, Mom.
Have a good evening. All right, we're going to move on to item 4, our Finance Committee. I'll turn it over to Mrs. Bonnefield.
I don't have anything tonight. Mrs. O'Quist?
We do not.
All right, thank you. Item 5, the Curriculum Committee. I'll turn it over to Mrs. Acosta.
Thank you, President Bradford. And we have nothing to report tonight.
Thank you. We're going to go ahead to item 6, our Policy Committee. And since Mrs. Frank is not here this evening, Mrs. Bonnefield, would you please run the Policy Committee this evening?
Thank you, Mrs. Bradford.
Yep.
Tonight for policy, we have one item. Mr. Etu is going to help us with field trips tonight.
I'm certainly going to try to. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
This is IFE Board Policy, Instructional Program Field Trips. We did have a good discussion last week at our study session regarding this topic, and I will go through both the board policy and the administrative procedures for recommendations, especially for the board policy. So as you can see, it was January of 2015, the last time that this was implemented, and we're looking to bring recommendations forward regarding field trips board policy. There weren't many changes to the board policy itself, and just as a reminder, Mr. Green, our Director of Elementary Programs, met with a small group of elementary administrators as well, discussing with the Division of Instruction what went into the board policy for field trips and what went into the administrative procedures for field trips. But for the board policy, as you can see, A, B, C, D, and E are the only areas in which you see some minor changes in terms of language that is used. Any questions for that in terms of the board policy?
Anybody? We're all good? It looks like we're all good.
For that one? And then for the administrative procedures, there are 11 bullet points, 11 items. We did go through those at great length at the last week's study session. The items 1 through 9 were part of the original administrative procedures. There are some minor changes within those as well. We did add number 10 and number 11. And if you'd like me to go through them, I can, but I'll follow your directions on that.
Could you also read the new criteria for number 2? I think that's important for the community to know.
Absolutely, yep. I can just go item by item. So for the administrative procedures, number 1, the definition remained the same. No changes there. For number 2, criteria, the first paragraph remained the same, and then we removed the first sentence of the second paragraph. And we added a third paragraph for number 2 for criteria, which reads, to the best of our ability, either through fundraising or financial assistance, we will ensure that all students, regardless of their socioeconomic status, have the opportunity to participate in field trips. Good. Number 3, mode of transportation remained the same. Number 4, local field trips. The only change is we struck through the last half of the last sentence for that. Number 5, for regular field trips, we did cross out, and you can see at the bottom, the last 2 lines there, which goes into the next page in the first line. And then we also added the word online for the application field trip. So that'll be a change for us. Number 6, longer field trips remained the same. Number 7, extended field trips remained the same. Number 8, parental permission remained the same. And number 9, field trip funds remained the same. We did, through conversation, add number 10, supervision and chaperones, and I'll read through each of those bullet points for us. The first bullet point for number 10 is teachers must ensure that students are adequately supervised and chaperoned by a responsible adult at all times during field trips. All chaperones must be at least age 21. Chaperones may not bring alcohol, marijuana, or unlawful drugs into school buildings or to field trip sites at any time. Use, consume, or be under the influence of marijuana or unlawful drugs while on school property, field trips, or while serving in any capacity as a chaperone. We then had a sentence that we originally put into the new administrative procedures for number 10, but now have removed. But then it continued with, a chaperone must adhere to all district and building volunteer requirements.
Mrs. Oquist?
Could we add, under the influence of, could we put alcohol in there?
Yes,
Because it looks like when we took it out in the other place,
Yep.
it's no longer in there.
absolutely.
Do we need to add vaping in there anywhere?
We can do
Yeah, they technically should not be smoking either.
like electronic device of some sort. Usually they're called like e-vapes and whatnot. Yeah, I can,
E-cigarettes, I think is what we
e-cigarettes,
had.
e-cigarettes is what we had, I believe.
And when they're on school property, the chaperones should be abiding by school policies, correct?
Correct.
I heard the word policy in there somewhere. I don't know if that can alleviate some of the list of items if we say they must adhere to.
That's in there.
Oh, is it on there? Sorry.
Yes, the last sentence,
Oh,
the
that's
chaperone
what-
must adhere to all district and building volunteer requirements, is what's in there currently.
Okay, all right. Any other questions?
The second bullet point for number 10, an iChat background check will be completed for each chaperone attending a field trip. And the third bullet point, the district will not prohibit an eligible student from participating in a field trip solely because the student's parent, guardian does not chaperone. Good. And then also, number 11, student conduct on field trips. A student's failure to comply with board policy, the student code of conduct, and any other applicable rules or behavioral expectations while on a field trip may result in disciplinary action and removal or exclusion from the trip.
Good.
Good. And then there is an exhibit that is part of board policy right now on the administrative, if you look online, but we will be removing that exhibit, knowing that we're going to an online field trip form, and we'll update that.
Okay. Questions? And Mr. Etu, the
Yes.
policy, are we ready for a first reading?
I would, recommending a first read for
Okay,
next
and
week's
then
meeting.
just a note that the admin procedures are not a board although those are shared with the board, and sometimes we get in a little lengthy, are not a part of, we do not have to vote on those admin procedures. Mrs. Jarvis.
Thank you. Regarding the ICHAP background check, do we need to include in here something that says it should be done annually? So that if they, for example, were a chaperone 3 years previously, they would still need a new ICHAT?
I don't know if we need to, Jen and Tony, can I lean on you for a second? Do we have to do an annual, do individuals have to do an annual iChat form?
Yes.
So we can add that in there. I just want to confirm that with HR. Say it again, I'm sorry.
Would that already be included under the statement that says they have to abide by all district and building volunteer requirements?
And I can put in there if you like, including an annual renewal of the iChat form.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Thank
Good.
you, Mr. Eaton.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, that will conclude our policy.
Thank you, Mrs. Bonnefield. We're going to move on to item 7, Personnel Committee. I'm going to turn it over to Vice President Johnson.
Thank you, President Bradford. I don't believe we have any items under personnel tonight.
We do not.
We do not. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to item 8, the Legislative Committee. I will turn it over to Mrs. Jarvis.
Thank you, President Bradford. We do not have any items under the Legislative Committee. Mrs. Oquist?
We do not, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well, that completes our agenda for this evening. I think it might be a record for us for our Committee of the Whole this evening. And I wish everybody a great evening, and we're adjourned tonight for our Committee of the Whole meeting. Thank you.